The two cartel leaders were taken into custody by U.S. authorities after a plane carrying the pair landed in southern New Mexico.
On July 25, 2024, Mayo Zambada took a private plane to inspect some properties in southern Mexico. Little did he know a plot was underway, and it'd be the last time he would walk as a free man. Here is how the arrest of Mayo changes everything. Now, the story of Ismael Mayo Zambada Garcia would start in the late 1980s, when he was closely associated with the Juarez cartel and its leader, Vicente Fuentes. However, before he became acquainted with Mexico's elite trafficking circles, Mayo was just a farmer and a small-time drug trafficker, selling mere kilograms of marijuana and heroin. So to better understand how Mayo came into so much power, we first need to take a look at Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as El Jefe de Jefes and El Padrino, meaning the boss of bosses and the godfather respectively. Miguel Gallardo was one of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel, alongside Rafael Caro Quintero. Gallardo would control a bulk of the drug trafficking in Mexico and along the Mexican-U.S. border in the 1980s. However, the murder of American DEA agent Enrique Camarena Salazar would force Gallardo to divide the Guadalajara cartel into two when the threat from American law enforcement became much worse. So in 1987, the Sinaloa cartel was formed from the division of Guadalajara, and the city of Culiacan acted as its headquarters. This is where Mayo comes into the picture. Gallardo was eventually arrested in 1989, and while in prison, he continued to be involved with his organization until he was moved to a maximum security facility in the early 90s. At that point, his nephews, the Arellano Felix brothers, would take on more prominent roles and solidify the second half of the Guadalajara cartel that was created after that split. This group came to be known as the Tijuana cartel. Meanwhile, the Sinaloa cartel would continue with its leaders, Héctor Luis Palma Salazar, Ismael Zambada Garcia, and Joaquin Guzman Lora, known more famously as El Chapo. So in the early 90s, the Sinaloa cartel faced significant challenges as they were trying to transport their products through the routes of the Tijuana cartel, which inevitably led to conflicts with the Arellano Felix organization. Now, this conflict would result in the deaths of two associates from Sinaloa, leading to a full-fledged war between these two cartels. Now, during this period, El Chapo delegated more responsibility to Mayo, who had a talent for collaborating with other traffickers. In addition to that, Zambada also played a significant role in the growth and expansion of the cartel, particularly while El Chapo and Palma were incarcerated in Mexico and the U.S. respectively. So ultimately, this shift in leadership contributed to the organization's ability to adapt and evolve. Also, because of his business savvy, Mayo helped Amado Carrillo Fuentes expand the Juarez cartel in the state of Chihuahua. He would incorporate some of the remnants of the Juarez that were created after Carrillo's death into the Sinaloa cartel. Now, it's suspected that the strategic alliance with the Juarez cartel was formed in response to the partnership of Mayo's archenemies, the Gulf and Tijuana cartels. And by the mid-90s, the Sinaloa cartel grew to be the size of the Medellin cartel during its prime. So between 1992 and 2000, a period of intense conflict would occur between Sinaloa and Tijuana cartels, despite the alliance with the Gulf cartel. Now, the war was so deadly that family members of cartel leaders on both sides were living in great fear. On top of this, the Mexican government would add further to the friction when it launched an attack against Mexico's drug trafficking networks. Unfortunately, the Tijuana cartel, which happened to be the largest and most sophisticated of the cartels at the time, received the greater part of the blows. With that, the Tijuana cartel faced two wars, one against the government and another with Sinaloa. However, Mayo would leverage this situation to his advantage and seize the opportunity to expand Sinaloa's influence in the drug trafficking world. He would begin to take over strongholds in northwestern Mexico, which were initially controlled by the Tijuana cartel. By the year 2000, Mayo had established himself as a prominent figure in Mexico's drug trade, building extensive networks spanning from Colombia to the U.S. His primary distribution hubs were allegedly located in major U.S. cities including Chicago, Phoenix, L.A., Atlanta, and Denver. Fearing no one, Mayo would become really powerful, And it was also reported he was allegedly involved in El Chapo's escape from Puente Grande prison in 2001 by sending a private chopper to aid in that escape. Throughout this time, the Tijuana cartel would fight back, but their influence began to dwindle. In 2014, Eduardo Teodoro Garcia Cimental, a former key figure of the Tijuana cartel's hierarchy, was forced to form an alliance with the Sinaloa cartel, causing a significant portion of the cartel's operations to fall under the control of El Mayo. So after dominating the northwestern Pacific coast of Mexico, the Sinaloa cartel, which later came to be called the Vicente Zambada organization or the Pacific cartel, El Mayo would start receiving massive quantities of cocaine, mostly by sea from Colombian sources thanks to independent ties to Colombian cocaine suppliers that he maintained during his time with the Juarez cartel. After he would get his guys and have various methods of transporting those drugs into the U.S. El Mayo's also been linked to controlling operations primarily in the Mexican states of Sinaloa and Durango, with influence extending along a significant portion of Mexico's Pacific coast. Under the leadership of El Mayo and El Chapo, the Sinaloa cartel significantly expanded its operations to further solidify its position as a dominant force in drugs. They would diversify their portfolio to include heroin, fentanyl, and ecstasy. And despite multiple arrests and seizures by both US and Mexico, El Mayo continued his operations. In fact, the crackdown would even lead to more advanced smuggling methods, like these tunnels under the US-Mexico border. Also, according to assessments by the US intelligence community, the Sinaloa cartel is currently considered the most extensive and powerful drug trafficking organization, not only in Mexico, but in the world. Now, in addition to the drug trade, Sinaloa is known for another thing, and that's extreme violence. This includes torture, kidnapping, and murder to maintain control and eliminate anyone who dares to cross them. In fact, they would take these brutal murders and sometimes post them on the internet as a warning to rival gangs. One such incident of violence by El Mayo and Chapo would take place in 2010, according to an indictment in western Texas on drug trafficking and organized crime charges. During a wedding ceremony in Ciudad Juarez, an American citizen and 2 members of his family were kidnapped because of their ties with the rival Juarez cartel. The target of this brutal attack was the groom, a resident of Columbus, New Mexico. Tragically, the groom's body was found 3 days after the wedding, alongside those of his brother and uncle in the bed of a pickup truck, with severe injuries from beatings and strangulation. His hands had also been severed above the wrists and deliberately placed on his chest. Let's go back to 1998. El Mayo became a fugitive when he was declared wanted by Mexico's Attorney General's office. Mexico has also issued bounties totaling $2.8 million on this guy and 5 other leaders of the Juarez cartel at that time. In addition to that, his influence was so strong that in the US, he was featured in a TV program, America's Most Wanted. The FBI was willing to pay $5 million for information leading to his capture, and in 2021, the US had raised that reward to $15 million. El Mayo's been evading arrest for many years, to the extent that various rumors started going around. Some say he had undergone plastic surgery, disguising himself to move around Mexico. Another rumor said he was out there walking free because of the numerous bribes and settlements he must have paid to Mexican authorities. None of these, however, were ever proven to be true. Remember, Sinaloa started off with 3 leaders, and until now 2 of the 3 were arrested. I'll take you to 1978. Azul Salazar was arrested in Arizona for drug trafficking and given 8 years in a U.S. prison. After serving his sentence, Salazar found out that his wife, Guadalupe Leia Serrano, along with his 2 children, had run off with an associate named Rafael Enrique Clavel. Unknown to Salazar, his former boss, Miguel Gallardo, had ordered the brutal murder of his family after he lost a large shipment of cocaine. So after Clavel deceived Serrano into running away with him, he forced her to withdraw $7 million from a bank account belonging to Salazar. After this, he would decapitate her and ship her head back to Salazar. And if that wasn't sick enough, he would take the 2 young children to Venezuela and throw them off a bridge. In retaliation of this, Salazar executed Clavel's 3 children and Gallardo's lawyer. Now, Salazar was unable to get Clavel, but the latter was later arrested and killed in jail by an inmate on Palma's orders. So let's go forward to June 23, 1995. Salazar was once again arrested by Mexican military officers and extradited to the U.S., where he served 19 years at the Atwater Federal Prison in California. During this time, the U.S. Department of Treasury sanctioned Salazar under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, or simply the Kingpin Act. Under this, all U.S. citizens and companies were banned from doing any kind of business activity with him. All of his assets in the U.S. were also frozen and seized. In June 2016, Salazar was charged with a double murder of police officers in Nayarit in 1995 and was extradited to Mexico. He's currently incarcerated at the Altiplano prison near Mexico City. So, El Mayo Zambada, alongside El Chapo, led the Sinaloa cartel until January 2016, when El Chapo was also captured. El Chapo's criminal career has been marked by dramatic captures and escapes. Fans of Dynasty know he was apprehended in Guatemala and later extradited to Mexico, where he received a 20-year sentence for murder and drug trafficking. However, that was short-lived, as he bribed multiple prison guards and escaped from a maximum security prison in 2001. His status as a fugitive triggered a substantial reward offer from both Mexico and the U.S., totaling $8.8 million for anything leading to his capture. El Chapo was again arrested in Mexico in 2014, but again that would be brief. Just some months in, he had escaped before his formal sentencing through a tunnel dug by associates into his jail cell.
The world's most wanted drug kingpin has been arrested after years on the run. He is a leader of one of the world's most powerful drug operations, the Sinaloa cartel. One U.S. city has named him public enemy number 1.
January 2016, Mexican authorities eventually recaptured him following an intense shootout. A year later, El Chapo was extradited to the U.S., where he faced trial for those criminal activities. 3 years later, El Chapo, who was estimated to match the influence and wealth of Colombia's Pablo Escobar, was found guilty on 10 federal criminal counts, which included engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to launder narcotics proceeds, international distribution of cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, and use of firearms. Now, interestingly, during that trial, El Chapo's lawyers argued that El Mayo was the real leader, while El Chapo was only the public face. In addition, it was also alleged that El Mayo had bribed the Mexican government to frame Guzman so that he could remain free to run the criminal organization. Consequently, El Chapo received a life imprisonment sentence and is currently at ADX Florence, a facility with a reputation for being the most secure supermax prison in the U.S. He was also ordered to forfeit more than $12.6 billion. Ever since then, Ismael El Mayo Zambada assumed full command of the Sinaloa cartel. And with this, he became Mexico's most enduring and powerful drug lord who has never seen the 4 walls of a jail cell, despite his multiple indictments, all of which involve a major violation of U.S. narcotics laws. So despite his power and reach, one thing does differentiate El Mayo from the rest, and that is he kept a low profile. In fact, try to find a picture of him online. El Mayo is one of the most community-conscious drug traffickers. Just like Pablo Escobar, he actively built a strong bond with the people in his native region. Reports say he was a generous patron of El Alamo, his hometown ranchera, as well as other surrounding towns in Sinaloa. Through his financial support, he has funded various infrastructure projects, community development initiatives, and cultural celebrations like festivals, parades, and even religious events. El Mayo also has several investments in businesses within Mexico. For example, through family members, Zambada Garcia is the owner of a large milk company, a bus line, and even a hotel. And we won't even mention the extensive real estate holdings. So now, over the past decade before his arrest, El Mayo has faced a series of attacks and setbacks after losing several trusted associates, including family members. He's married to Rosario Niebla Cardoza, and together they have 4 sons and 4 daughters. The whole family has been deeply involved in the narcotics trade, with some members, especially his sons, playing active roles. Nica del Rosario and Modesta are also not left out, as each of them have been linked to having various roles in narcotics distribution and money laundering. So on October 20, 2010, authorities would arrest his brother, Jesus El Rey Zambada, and this would be followed by the capture of his two sons, Ismael El Mayito Gordo Zambada Imperial and Vicente El Vicentillo Zambada Niebla, between 2010 and 2019. They were extradited shortly after their arrest to the U.S. to face justice. Another son, Sefarin Zambada Ortiz, was also arrested in Arizona in 2013. He spent 5 years behind bars and was released in 2018. Now, interestingly, these family members decided to cooperate with the U.S. justice system. In exchange, they had reduced sentences and early releases. In fact, El Rey testified against El Chapo in his 2019 trial in New York. So talking about his sons now, Vicente El Vicentillo Zambada Niebla was a force to be reckoned with in the Sinaloa cartel. Before his arrest on the 18th of March 2009, Vicente played a crucial role. He was masterminding the logistics of smuggling massive shipments of cocaine, often exceeding multiple tons, from Central and South America and straight into the U.S. Now, to do this, he had an extensive network of transportation modes, employing Boeing 747 cargo planes for airborne delivery, narco submarines for clandestine underwater transportation. He would get container ships to conceal his drugs amongst legitimate cargo, and get those high-speed super-fast boats for swift coastal transfers. Additionally, he would get fishing vessels to disguise his illicit activities as legitimate trips, while at the same time using buses and rail cars for overland transport throughout Mexico. Vicente Zambada would get tractor trailers and any kind of automobile for that final delivery straight over the U.S. border. So it therefore goes without saying that Vicente's vast resources and creative methods have allowed the Sinaloa cartel to maintain a strong grip on the global cocaine trade.
Vicente Zambada Niebla, alias El Vicentillo, hijo de Ismael El Mayo Zambada, y quien en la actualidad se encontraba operando para el narcotraficante prófugo.
February 18, 2010, Vicente was extradited to Chicago to face federal charges. 8 years later, he pled guilty and agreed to cooperate with the government. As part of this deal, Vicente testified against El Chapo and revealed how he passed along orders for murders and kidnappings. He also talked about how he and El Chapo coordinated smuggling tons of cocaine and heroin for his father. Now, if you think El Mayo's son testifying against his father's closest associate, who he's known since he was, 15 years old, is bad? Wait until you hear the other things he had to say about his own father. According to Vicente Zambada, El Mayo always budgeted $1 million every month for bribes that were paid to banks and high-level Mexican public officials. So in return for his cooperation, Vicente was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He also had to pay a fine of $4 million and forfeit assets worth $1.37 billion to the U.S. government. Let's go to February 2017. El Mayo survives an attack, allegedly carried out by Damaso Licenciado Lopez Núñez, another top-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel. That ambush also targeted two of El Chapo's sons, suggesting this internal power struggle going on, following their boss's capture and extradition to the U.S. maybe. However, unlike his sons, there is no record of any of El Mayo's daughters being arrested.
Top leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most dominant criminal organizations in Mexico, are now behind bars.
And now we're at Thursday, July 25th, 2024. El Mayo's luck had finally ran out, as he was arrested by U.S. authorities. This was only possible because of a collaborative effort between U.S. law enforcement and a key informant, which also happens to be El Chapo's son, Joaquin Guzman Lopez. Now, according to reports here, Lopez played this crucial role in orchestrating El Mayo's capture by convincing him to board that private plane under the pretense of inspecting a property in southern Mexico.
Two cartel leaders were taken into custody by U.S. authorities after a plane carrying the pair landed in southern New Mexico. Law enforcement was already on the ground waiting for the plane's arrival, and two men were arrested.
Unknown to El Mayo, that plane was going straight for El Paso, Texas, where the FBI were waiting for him. That clever setup was the height of a months-long joint operation between Homeland Security and the FBI, which had exploited a rift and a fight for power within the Sinaloa cartel. Guzman Lopez, who had previously surrendered to U.S. authorities, agreed to cooperate with law enforcement to bring down El Mayo. Now, it's really unclear why Lopez accepted to work with the FBI, but what is known is that U.S. law enforcement agencies have been engaging in subtle efforts to persuade Joaquin Guzman Lopez to surrender, following his father's conviction and multiple indictments for a while now. Lopez has been implicated as a crucial figure in the cartel's operations, as he was in charge of establishing and maintaining key relationships with Asian suppliers to ensure a steady import of chemicals which are then used to manufacture synthetic fentanyl into Mexico. Furthermore, Lopez was alleged to play a pivotal role in setting up and overseeing secret laboratories where these chemicals were transformed into the drug. He was previously indicted by a federal grand jury in Illinois on narcotics, money laundering, and firearms charges. Now, there's some people out there saying that Lopez may have acted out of a desire for retribution, possibly believing El Mayo was responsible for his father's arrest and subsequent incarceration, just like El Chapo's lawyers claim. On the other hand, it could be just as easy as him wanting a more lenient sentence in exchange for his cooperation in bringing down yet another high-ranking cartel figure. So El Mayo faces a multitude of charges in the U.S., including fentanyl and drug trafficking, murder, kidnapping, money laundering, and involvement in organized crime. Additionally, he is wanted in Mexico on 4 active warrants related to organized crime and unlawful activities in relation to the Sinaloa cartel. On the 26th of July 2024, El Mayo appeared in court in El Paso following his arrest in a wheelchair. The 76-year-old drug baron was read his rights and charges and then entered a plea of not guilty. As a result, a federal judge ruled that El Mayo was to be held without bail, pending a detention hearing, currently scheduled for July 31st. The decision ensures that El Mayo will remain in custody until the hearing, where his detention status will be reassessed. Also, according to court records, El Mayo waived his right to be present at his arraignment and detention hearings, but will be required to make an appearance at a status conference on August 1st, where Judge Caitlin Cardone will take over the case. On the other hand now, Joaquin Guzman Lopez was transported to Chicago. He's currently being held in a Chicago federal prison and is scheduled to make his first court appearance on July 30th. Notably, this arrest marks the first time El Mayo has been taken into custody, making him the last of Mexico's 37 most wanted drug lords to be apprehended. So guys, a significant shift is said to be on the horizon for Mexico's infamous Sinaloa cartel following the arrest of Ismael El Mayo Zambada by U.S. authorities. As the last remaining prominent figure of Mexico's drug traffickers, it is safe to say that El Mayo's capture marks the end of an era. However, keep in mind now that El Mayo is a cunning and skilled drug lord, known for his ability to bribe officials and make deals with anyone, even his enemies, when he was in power. Despite his negative influence globally and retirement due to his age and ill health, his negotiation skills have been thought to prevent deadly cartel wars. So, now that he's gone, Vanda Velbab Brown, a researcher at Washington's Brookings Institution who closely monitors Mexican security, predicts the possibility of increased violence in Mexico in the coming days. In fact, the retaliation of the Sinaloa cartel to El Mayo's arrest might just be more deadly than the events that took place after the arrest of El Chapo's son, Ovidio Guzman Lopez. Let's also not forget to mention that Los Chapitos of the Sinaloa cartel, led by the sons of El Chapo, haven't been on good terms with El Mayo ever since Ovidio Guzman was arrested. As a result of that, a power struggle within the Sinaloa cartel is also to be expected. This could mean an internal war, and we could be watching top leaders get arrested and killed. Now, aside from internal war, we have rival cartels, especially the CJNG, or Jalisco New Generation Cartel, who might just see this as an opportunity to strike. I mean, really, even ambitious newcomers might see it as an opportunity to fight for power. Historically, the removal of cartel leaders has been known to make organizations split. The division triggers violent conflicts between new factions as they fight for control of territory, lucrative routes into the U.S., and whatever source of income they can get, just like what happened with Sinaloa and Tijuana. So they're getting ready. We have the Mexican government deploying 200 special forces to Culiacan, the capital of Sinaloa. And like we said, it is their HQ, so this move aims to maintain control and prevent chaos. At the same time, many experts and common sense says that arresting cartel leaders will do little to stop the flow of drugs into the US and Europe, raising doubts that even with the absence of El Mayo, it wouldn't really stop the smuggle of fentanyl and other deadly drugs. On the other hand, El Mayo's been dubbed Sinaloa's most skilled agent of corruption and the most influential trafficker. And this guy can provide vast knowledge and experience to authorities, potentially making him a valuable informant for U.S. prosecutors. If this guy agrees to a plea deal, the U.S. will gain crucial insights into the cartel's operation and networks. As further investigations are underway, the arrest of Ismael El Mayo Zambada and of course Joaquin Guzman Lopez are considered some of the biggest victories for U.S. law enforcement against the cartels.